Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
We will, as long as you take this number down. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call me. You call us, we'll call you back. Establish a clear line and get down to business. You can text also, talk, to 87222. And you can tweet us at George Galloway or at Talk Radio, and it will all form part of a cornucopia of controversy, because I don't mince my words and I don't want you to mince yours. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio!
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio.
Where is Wally? We're still looking for Wally. Owen Smith, I think his name is, the challenger for the Labour leadership. Another week, another no-show for Wally. Maybe that's because I would have asked him, as no other journalist or broadcaster has seriously asked him, if he was really serious about getting ISIS around the table for talks. Have you ever heard anything so idiotic? And if Jeremy Corbyn had said, no, let's stop trying to destroy ISIS, let's get them round the table for talks, Corbyn would be no longer a candidate for leadership of the Labour Party, because he would have been swamped in a tidal wave of derision and condemnation, maybe even a visit from the police. But Owen Smith said it, and the media let him off the hook. What did they focus on instead? Apparently, Corbyn failed to identify somebody called Anton Deck. Now, I don't know Anton Deck, but I do know ISIS. I do know that those who cut the heads off children, who eat people's hearts and video themselves doing it and put it out on the internet because they figure it might be a good look, people who have no demands that anyone could conceivably negotiate, ain't going to sit round a table with Owen Smith. In fact, Smith would be on the table, being devoured by these savage beasts. And it's a measure of his utter cluelessness, this corporal clot of a man who wants to be the leader of Her Majesty's opposition and who runs and hides when it comes to anyone who'd be able to and willing to, that's the point, willing to put his feet to the fire in a proper interview. There's a YouGov poll. It was supposed to be out on Monday. Then it was supposed to be out on Wednesday. It's now Friday and it still isn't out. It's a YouGov poll on the likely outcome of the Labour leadership contest. And I hear that it is so bad, so absurdly bad for Owen Smith that they've had to call in the boffins to double and triple check whether it's some statistical aberration. You really would be better to chuck it now, Owen, because if you're defeated in an avalanche, well, that's going to leave your next step all the less credible. They're barking mad, these owners of these savage dogs that are eating our children and even grown men this week and many, many, many weeks. I've been talking about this on TalkSport and now on Talk Radio for the best part of a decade. What kind of idiot has an American bulldog? Not just a bulldog, an American bulldog, presumably, like most things, an even more savage version than the common or garden English bulldog. What kind of idiot has such a dog in the same room as a 3-year-old child, now deceased? And just as I got into the studio, I learned that somebody else had been killed this week. This time a grown man, killed by a Staffy cross Labrador. I'm always being told, some of my best friends have Staffies, and they're always upset when I go off on one on this. They tell me how nice they are. Well, maybe they are nice until they're not. And when they're not, the consequences are severe to fatal. Let me tell you, I haven't moved 1 inch from the line I used to propagate back in the TalkSport days. These dangerous breeds should be banned from Britain. Those that are not banned should not be allowed in a public place without a muzzle, and it should be a much more serious criminal offence to expose a vulnerable person like a child to potential attack from a dangerous dog. Discuss. We'll be talking to a solicitor about the dangerous dog legislation in the United Kingdom and what's needed. I sat through the rush of the original Dangerous Dogs Act. It was reached in a hurry, and it hasn't solved the problem, and it's time to return to this issue again. Here I must drop the canine metaphor, lest it be misunderstood. So imagine a big, giant full stop right now. I'm interviewing Lisa Duffy, the savagely right-wing UKIP leadership candidate. Rabid, I'd call her if she wasn't so nice, like one of those Staffies. Nice, until she's not. She's the candidate scraping the barrel of anti-Muslim prejudice in Britain. But she is a candidate for the leadership of a major British political party, so it's only fair that we give her a chance, as we would have given Wally if he'd had the guts to show up. But Lisa Duffy, unless she's put off by my introduction, has agreed to be interviewed by me. And back on the subject of dangerous, rabid dogs, what about Donald Trump? He of the little hands. You know, I didn't actually know what they meant by that until last night. I saw him giving a speech. He's this great big hulk of a man with the hands of a child. I don't know what it means, if it means anything at all. I make no allusion to any other part of his anatomy, but he's definitely out there swinging it, insulting all and sundry. Anyone that crosses his radar is subject to the full barrage of Trump invective. It's not very articulate. It's often, usually in fact, misspoken. He oftentimes has to make corrections and roll back. but it's onwards and upwards with his little hands, threatening, browbeating, belligerently bullying any section of the American public, or indeed the world, that might get him another few votes. But he did something weird this week. He apologized for any and all offense that he might have caused, and we'll be examining with an expert what this might mean and whether or not it will have the desired effect. You see, it's unlikely to assuage the doubts, let me put it no higher, of America's minority populations about what would be in store for them if Trump became president. But it might just put off some of the knuckle-dragging Ku Klux Klanners who are marching behind him now. The angry Joe Six-Pack, after he's consumed all 6 of them, is gung-ho for Donald Trump, no doubt. Will he be put off by the new, kinder, more gentle Donald Trump? Is it time for him to bring out his little hands, make a virtue of them? See, I have a baby's hands. I can be kind. I can be gentle. All of that is coming up in the next 2 3/4 hours, and I want you to join in. 0844 499 1000. Call me. It's George Galloway. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Well, are you? Are you hard enough? Are you smart enough? If you are, hit the phones. 0844 499 1000. I promise not to savage you, unless you deserve it. Or you can tweet me at George Galloway or us at Talk Radio. And this is your show as much as it is mine. So I want calls and I want women callers. I can't have all male shows. So if you're a potential woman caller, your call will be prioritized. Now, Nigel Farage set the cat amongst the pigeons again when, in the wake of the result of the Euro referendum, he once again resigned. It's the 3rd time that he has resigned as the leader of UKIP, and I promise you, you heard it here, it will not be the last time that Nigel Farage will resign as leader of UKIP. Meanwhile, lesser breeds of politicians, a parade of the unknown, I have unkindly described them as a donkey derby, but hey, I'm in a canine kind of mood this evening. So a parade of the smaller varieties of canines. Think of Crufts. Think of a parade of small canines, as opposed to the bull mastiff that is Nigel Farage. Last week, we spoke to one of them, whose name I have already forgotten, Elizabeth somebody, but tonight we're talking to possibly the friskiest of the UKIP leadership candidates. She's a Cambridgeshire councillor. She's running to be leader of a party that got 4 million votes at the last general election. She's Lisa Duffy. Good evening.
Good evening.
Lisa Duffy, you're one of the runners for the leadership of UKIP after Nigel Farage's 2nd or 3rd resignation. Why should UKIPers vote for you?
I'm a big player within UKIP. I've been part of it now for 12 years. I built their Westminster by-elections up and I ran the campaign against you, George, up in Bradford West. But I've really built and put the UKIP election success on the map. I'm a team player. I'm a good builder of individuals. I've got good common sense. I'm a strong, determined individual, but one that wants to bring a a forthright female to the front of UKIP that can show the electorate we can take Westminster seats.
And what politically differentiates you from the other candidates?
I think what's different about me is not necessarily politically. I think, we have a fantastic 2015 manifesto that we just need to continue to build on. What makes me different is I am grassroots. I believe in our grassroots. I'm a first-past-the-post elected councillor. I know about winning first-past-the-post. And I think that's what I can bring. But equally, I've got the skills to pull people together, to grow grassroots. And I think the difference is I've never been an MEP, didn't want to be one. I've built the UK base, and that's my strength compared to them.
But you are going for the ban the burkini vote, aren't you?
No, not at all. I don't want to ban the burkini at all, and I've never said that. What I want to do is to ban Sharia law. I want one law for all, and I'm asking for Muslim females to show their face in a public place in areas of high security, just as you would if you were wearing a crash helmet. So it's just about fairness, but I've also launched a positive vision for British Muslims, and it's one where I would like to see fairness, opportunity and equality, so that British Muslims have as many rights and opportunities as any other female in our country.
Well, you say ban Sharia law, but there is no Sharia law. Everyone is subject to the same law in Britain.
But then there are Sharia courts that I think a lot of Muslim women aren't even aware that isn't law. And that in Sharia courts, the word of the female is only worth that of half of the man. That's not right in 2016. The word of every individual should be the same as every other.
But there are no Sharia courts.
Well, why are people talking about it? Why is it one of the hot topics on the doorstep?
Because you're talking about it. Because you're talking about it. There's no such thing.
Talking about it.
Lisa, Lisa, I know more about this than you.
There's no Sharia courts at all.
Lisa, I know more about this than you do.
I'm sure you do, George.
There are no Sharia courts in Britain. There are voluntary arrangements, just like there is in the Jewish community, for matters of marriage, family relations and so on, where both parties voluntarily agree to enter a system of arbitration, which has absolutely no force in law whatsoever.
And that's brilliant, George.
But why are you making it an issue?
I'm not making it an issue, George. You are. You brought it up.
But that's the only thing I know about you, is that you want to ban the burqa.
Oh, would you like to hear something else? Last week I launched my paper on the NHS wanting to fund an extra £1 billion for mental health services, because that is a huge problem coming down the line. It doesn't have enough investment. People aren't comfortable talking about mental health. And for me, that is an even bigger issue for this country moving forward. So that's something else you now know about me.
Yeah, well, I should think it's rather more important than what a Muslim man and a Muslim woman decide to do about, for example, the custody of their children outside the law with no force of law.
And I think the other thing I'll be launching, it will be my law and order paper next Thursday. So
tell us about that, Lisa.
So we'll be talking about lots of other issues, but law and order, we need to be a country that, invests back in our neighbourhood policing. We know that community policing is seriously underfunded. We know that when families and communities start to break down, the police can be there to help and support. When you don't have that level of security at a local level, then bigger issues start rising. We've got to be tough on people who are dealing drugs. We need to make sure our prison sentences mean what they say, and prisons aren't holiday camps. So there's a bigger piece of work to do, George.
Have you ever been in a prison?
Have I been in one? I've never been a prisoner.
No, of course, neither have I, but I've been in plenty of prisons.
I've done a lot of work as well as a youth offender supporter, so I've done a voluntary role there as well. And I've seen the good work that can be done with first-time offenders. And that, for me, is so important, to stop the repeat offenders, because everyone makes mistakes, but it's about supporting them so those mistakes don't happen again and again.
It's just the reference to prisons as holiday camps. Isn't that the cheapest Sun, Daily Mail trolling?
No, I don't think so, George. I think, people wouldn't expect someone going to prison to be sitting playing on Xboxes. I think people want to know that when somebody has caused a crime and they go to prison, that actually their lives aren't much better than they would be if they were sitting in their bedroom at home. But actually they're learning from the experience. It is a punishment, but it's also the ability to make sure that they get the support and the training so that they don't offend again and again. And we see too often the reoffending rates just go up, and that's not right.
That's true.
And we can also see the difficulty one individual can cause a whole community.
Indeed. Now, let me ask you about something else. You
Yes,
said on the BBC that Aaron Banks was using the party as his puppet. Is that not a bit ungracious, considering the millions of pounds that he's given to UKIP?
I said a lot more than just that, George, and as did the other candidates who were on the stage. What we're actually saying is we're actually incredibly grateful to everything that Aaron has given to the party. What we're saying is one individual shouldn't be funding a political party. If you've only got one individual, then the perception is that they start pulling the strings in the direction of the party. For us to be successful moving forward, we need to bring on board many more donors who can give as much as Aaron or just small amounts. But the key thing is building up our membership, because the more members you have, the more money you have.
But he didn't pull Nigel Farage's strings, did he? Nobody could do that.
I don't think I've worked with Nigel for many years. It would be very difficult to pull Nigel's strings. But what we've got to be very careful as a party going forward is that one person doesn't rule the roost. This is about a team moving forward. This is about opening up to 13 million people who didn't vote UKIP in the general election but voted Brexit. This is about a new era, a new face, and a new beginning for Westminster. So we've done the EU. It's now about going and taking those Westminster seats.
How are your relations with Nigel Farage?
I get on very well with Nigel. We worked together over many years. I think we've got the type of relationship where we can each say what we need to say and move on. We've always worked well together. Nigel is an incredible character, and there'll never be a second one. And I do believe I'm the only candidate that is recognising how hard he's worked, but also calling for him to actually have a seat in the House of Lords, because I think he honestly deserves it after 23 years.
Do you think he'll vote for you?
I doubt it very much, George.
Well, that's very candid of you, as you have been throughout, so thanks very much for that. Lisa Duffy, candidate for the leadership of the United Kingdom Independence Party.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
Well, the aforementioned Aaron Banks has tweeted me. I said this won't be the last time Nigel Farage resigns as UKIP leader. You heard it here first. Aaron says he's resigned and grown a 70s porn moustache. Fair play, George. That's fair enough. It is exactly a 70s porn moustache, and I should know because I had one, but in the 70s, not in 2016. Thanks for that, Aaron. It was, as I put it to Lisa Duffy, a bit ungracious to attack the only person who's ever given you significant financial backing by virtue of reference to the fact that he shouldn't be alone in dictating, in donating large sums of money for fear that he might be dictating events, although she conceded that he was not dictating events because nobody could dictate to Nigel Farage. So a man who wasn't dictating events but was the only one donating significant sums becomes an election football in the leadership of the UKIP. But you heard what she had to say. You know my views. Let me read a couple of tweets because a lot of them are coming in. Tags says, with reference to Where's Wally, well, maybe Owen Smith's negotiating ISIS's surrender. Very good point. And C. Mac 59 says, if you want to listen to erudite commentary on matters Owen Smith, then George Galloway is now on Talk Radio. Thank you very much indeed. Dickie says, I totally agree, George. Old dogs should be muzzled when out in public. I mean, for me, that's a no-brainer, frankly. How can anybody oppose that? Certainly old dogs above a certain weight, size. I mean, people say, well, you can get a Scotch Terrier could be fierce, could bite you. But yeah, it would bite you on your ankles. It couldn't bite you on your throat. It couldn't kill your child. That's the difference. And someone whose name I can't read says, that's very true. Some people can't be negotiated with. They are demons that would happily lop his head off. And another says, I usually agree with you, but breed has got nothing to do with it. You'll always get people, including people who otherwise agree with me, who take a different line on dangerous dogs. And that's all to the good. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. Andy in Hackney has. Let's hear from him. Andy, welcome.
How you doing, George?
Very good, thanks. What would you like to say?
Well, where do we start with this whole Owen Smith, Jeremy Corbyn leadership battle? I think it's, as such a producer, I think it's ridiculous we're even having a leadership election after, 9 months from the first one. But,
exactly, yeah.
And could you imagine 7 years ago when I first met you that we would be having a leadership election race where, first of all, Jeremy Corbyn was the leader, and secondly, that there would be two people in the race, both trying to tell us we're the full-on socialists. I mean, Jeremy is a socialist, but I'm not too sure about Owen Smith's credentials in that department.
Indeed, he's a little less convincing. That's true. But you're right, he is having to fake a move to the left, and he's still, from all accounts, getting a bloody good hiding. You heard me say perhaps the YouGov poll is effectively being suppressed. It was supposed to be out on Monday. It's now Friday. It's not out.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that myself. I'm glad. It's interesting to hear you say that tonight. I mean, there's so much here that me and you, George, could talk for probably 3 hours on this. But I mean, can I say you've said a lot of these things yourself over the last few weeks. But there's a group in the PLP that simply has never had confidence in Jeremy Corbyn.
No,
so
they were plotting to get rid of him before he even took office, Andy.
Well, yeah, you can see that all the briefings, the anonymous members, and you just have to look at the Twitter feeds of people like Jamie Reid and John Woodcock, and these people are just every day they're going for him. I mean, you imagine going to work every single day of the week and having to first thing you've got to do is defend off attacks from your own side before you've even done a single bit of work. That's what Jeremy's had to put up with for the last 9 or 10 months, and I think it's absolutely awful. I've got a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind me asking.
Yes, go ahead.
I want your opinion on this. When it comes to the media, should he give some ground and appear on some of the shows, such as you've been on it, the ITV show with Piers Morgan, to reach out to a wider audience? Because is social media enough, is my question on that, do you think?
No, it isn't. And, of course, after the Labour leadership contest is over, Jeremy Corbyn will have to get, further out and about. I might not know who this guy is, this Anton Deck, but I do know a lot about what's happening in the country and about the culture and what's on TV and what movies are out and what music is current and so on. And, I'm only 5-6 years younger than Jeremy, so he's going to need to get smarter on these things, and he will have to put himself about. But when you are the uncontested leader of the opposition, you have a certain position, and you can't be treated like you were a mad dog. But because Jeremy's leadership has been contested from the off inside the Labour Party, it grants open season to the hacks and the reptiles in the media to treat every interview or encounter with Corbyn as if it were an existential matter. And that's what's got to be ended. Now, you and I both know Seamus Milne, who's in charge of these things in Corbyn's leadership team. He knows that Jeremy will have to build outwards, but he's going to be building outwards from a tremendously big and powerful base. And that's surely the way that politics has to go. You get 1 million members of the Labour Party, then you can go looking for the other 11 million voters that you'll need. Just do the maths. If every member of the Labour Party, let's say we can reach 1 million members of the Labour Party, say by this time next year, and I think that's eminently doable. Then every one of them has to persuade 11 other people to vote Labour. And Bob's your uncle. It can be done.
I'm one of those members, George, in Hackney.
Okay, I'm not yet, but,
no, but hopefully
good for
you're
you.
back in.
Okay, that was one question. What's your second?
The second question was, in terms of criticism of him, which is always going to be allowed. Anyone can be criticised constructively. But I'm concerned at a time when there's a leadership election, you've got the likes of Owen Jones coming out with these questions for Labour supporters. And I actually had an exchange with Owen on Facebook about this. And I said to him, he's someone who's been around left-wing politics for a very long time. And he should know about tactics, if anything else. Now, during a leadership election, his piece just played into the hands of the other side. Surely. And even if you have these questions to be asked, surely he could have even waited a few more weeks.
Well, he could have asked them personally, face to face.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a part of the Corbyn caravan right from the beginning. Of course, the questions that he raised were, with one or two exceptions, perfectly legitimate questions.
Absolutely.
But when you're in a battle, in a firefight, so ferocious as this, what you don't need is the guy at your side saying, hey, hang on, wait a minute, I've got some questions about your leadership. In a firefight, you have to just keep fighting until the enemy has been quelled. And then you can say, sat around the campfire after the battle, by the way, Jeremy, what about this, and this? And I'm not a fan of Owen Jones. I never have been, although I think he's an exceptionally good writer. I think his book, Chavs, was a very fine book. Even his criticisms of me in it were accurate, and I didn't then but now see the force of the point that he was making in that book about me. And the material that he writes is always worth reading, even when you don't agree with it. So I really hope that he'll steady up and get back on side. He still hasn't told us who he's going to vote for. Anyway, Andy, in Hackney, it's been a pleasure talking to you. As always, thanks for that call. 0844 499 1000.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Now, as I said, coming up later in the programme, we'll talk to a solicitor about dangerous dog legislation in the UK after the death of both a baby and a man attacked by a dog just this week. And after me comes, of course, the great Ian Lee. I listened to him last week from a council house in Edinburgh somewhere, and he was in tip-top form. I guess he's back in London already, but wherever he is, he's worth listening. And tomorrow, from 8, Patrina, the pet coach, joins Penny Smith to talk about how to avoid the problems of dangerous dogs. And Dr. Kerry Nixon gives an insight into the mind of the murderer of Sadie Hartley. So tune in to Talk Radio tomorrow morning. You won't want to miss it. Now, Matthew Hammers says, re Farage, he's realised there's no Brexit, just empty promises put on the back burner. Well, I'm not sure about that. Calky MacLeod says it's scandalous how the MSM have ignored Smith's ISIS gaffe. Tells us all we need to know. It is, astounding that one of two Labour leadership contenders called for peace talks around the table with ISIS, and nobody noticed. Except they all did notice. They just pretended he hadn't said it. Had Jeremy Corbyn said it, he'd probably now be being interviewed by the Metropolitan Police. So, call me 0844 499 1000. What do you think about UKIP and the parade of smaller breeds that are running for the UKIP leadership? What do you think of the Labour leadership. What do you think of the dangerous dogs issue? Let's talk to Steve in Nuneaton. Go ahead, Steve. I see that's in Staffordshire. I hope my comments about the Staffordshire Bull Terriers hasn't caused mass offence in the county. Go ahead.
Good evening, George. An absolute pleasure to speak to you again.
Thank you, sir.
Well, what I'd like to make 3 points actually tonight, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And the first one is about the mainstream media and the bias over the hustings. The BBC husting that was on earlier this week, the
That was
Victoria
a disgrace,
Derbyshire
an
one.
absolute farce.
It was more about her self-promotion, wasn't it, George, than a husting, actually?
That was really absurd. And, of course, when they asked the undecideds what they were now intending to do, and this mass influx of Corbyn voters suddenly appeared, and Smith looking gormless, looking like Corporal Clot, standing there alone. None of that made it onto the BBC's own news, even though it happened on their own programme.
Yeah, this is my point, George. And the one solitary lady that was sat there, Victoria Derbyshire, went over to her to see if she was going to go to Owen Smith. And she said, no, she says, I'm just going to remain undecided. So she didn't even go over.
No. Unbelievable.
And that didn't make it to the news. But the Birmingham hustings, you know.
Was that last night?
Yeah, the one in Birmingham, yeah. You know, Owen Smith on numerous occasions was roundly booed for talking as if Jeremy Corbyn caused the division in the Labour Party. And then it was also sideways blamed for the ratings fall. And they actually had to stop the husting for a few minutes, calm people down before they can carry on. And I noticed, you know, George, that the only thing that was on the BBC was a very small clip of Jeremy Corbyn saying he would negotiate peace sooner than war, intimating that he was wrong.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, it is Kafkaesque when you stand against somebody and he's blamed for the division caused by you standing against him. You couldn't make that up.
No, absolutely appalling, George. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn was right about that. And he was right when he was doing the right thing in supporting gay rights. And he got demonised for that. He was right by supporting the peace talks in Northern Ireland, and he got called a terrorist for that. And he was right in opposing Blair over Iraq, and he got chastised for that. And he was bloody right in supporting the miners when even Neil Kinnock wouldn't do it.
Well,
so
never was
the man who's not going to throw in his principles over some chicken coop. Oh, I'm sorry, George,
Never was the word even more otious. Even Neil Kinnock, you said. Neil Kinnock betrayed the miners.
Yes, he did.
The very people from whence he came.
Yes.
He betrayed his own father as a coal miner. He betrayed his own village, his own county, his own country, his own class.
Yeah, absolutely. I was so irate by it all. Particularly the intimation of that, that he would try and broker peace sooner than war, and they used that as some tool against him. Yeah. When the man has had principles the same way for over 30 years. And, you know, I always think, I cut things to a very clear vision for anybody who want to speak to them. And I always say to them, you put an image in your mind when that great radical socialist, Mr. Owen Smith, says he supports the NHS. I just say, you think back to the doctor strike. Did you see Owen Smith standing there with them?
He was opposed to the strike, as was Heidi Alexander, the then Labour health spokesperson.
Yes.
That group were all against the junior doctor strike.
Yeah. Did you see him standing there with them? No, you didn't. Did you see Ian McNichol there standing with them? No, you didn't. Did you see Heidi Alexander there standing with them? No, you didn't. But what I clearly remember was the man who's doing the work that would tire any 25-year-old Jeremy Corbyn.
Well said, Steve.
Real principles, not phony election promises.
Well said, Steve, in Nuneaton. Now, I'm going to Liverpool in the early morning, actually. I'm appearing at 4:40 at Fact Cinema in Liverpool. Maybe my next caller will come along. Alex in Liverpool, go ahead.
Hiya, George. It's
Hi.
great to speak to you, mate. Hiya, George. My brother actually met you, in fact, George, last Sunday, I think it was.
Well, it's been going so well, they've asked me to come up and do another turn. So 4:40 tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, he got a quick picture with you, George. He's got it up on Facebook now. I think his face isn't even in it, so it's the best, the most handsome Facebook profile picture he's ever had.
Oh, well, fantastic, thank you.
Yeah. But,
I love Liverpool. I'm falling in love with it all over again. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, George, just to echo what the last caller said about Neil Kinnock, you couldn't get a worse-class traitor, and that was shown...
Lord, we should call him Lord Kinnock, yeah? Baron Kinnock, and his wife, Baroness Kinnock.
Well, yeah, he threw Liverpool down the Swanee in the 80s, and I'd just like to, George, defend some of the achievements of the council in Liverpool in the 80s. You're getting lots of propaganda now against the Trotskyist movement. Now, I'm not a Trotskyist myself, but they did have some influence in Liverpool in the 80s, and the achievements were quite significant. So I'm just going to quote to you, George, if it's okay.
Yeah, quickly, yeah.
An excerpt from the Echo, Liverpool Echo, in 1985, September 1985. These are two people who got new houses in Garston in Liverpool, right? This area is my home. I wouldn't want to leave, but our old houses were disgusting. Now I've got everything I want in life. My friends around me and a beautiful new home. That was a pensioner, right? This is a young mother. We are one big happy family here. We could never have been happy in the old slums, but now everything is perfect, right? They're just simple statements, George, from working class people. Mm-hmm. And when Tom Watson goes around condemning the evil Trotskyists and all the rest of it.
The Trotskyite twist.
Yeah.
I've been looking for him too. Never mind where's Wally. I'm looking for where's Fatty. Where is Tom Watson? I did everything. I put out honey. I laid traps. I went round with a big net looking for the big ugly bear. But he didn't show up. He wouldn't show up, even though he's had a long, long history with me. I couldn't find him to discuss the Trotskyite twist.
Well, I noticed another thing the other week. Owen Smith mentioned something about Derek Hatton, saying how he was never a fan of Derek Hatton. Well, I know Derek Hatton has since left the militant movement and so on, but the reason he engenders such hatred from the right wing of the Labour Party is because, like them, Derek likes nice cars and nice food and nice clothes and all the rest of it. But unlike them, when Derek was near power, he did not betray the working class. And that's why he gets such hatred from people like Owen Smith and all the Blairites and all the Kinnockites. And one last thing, George, before I go. When Tony Mullane, who was leader of the District Labour Party in Liverpool in the 80s...
Now, he was an outstanding man. I knew him well.
He's a fantastic gentleman. When he was in front of a judge in the High Court, I think it was the Appeal Court, the judge was Lord Lawton. He stood for Mosley's British Union of Fascists in 1936.
Oh, my goodness.
So there's another thing about how the judiciary is meant to be independent. Anyway, Lord Lawton said to Tony and some of the other city councillors who were expelled, he said, I uphold your expulsion and I uphold the said charge against you. I think they got charged £300,000. Right, Tony Mullane looked at the judge and replied, you can expel me from the Labour Party, but you can't expel me from the working class. Now,
okay, Alex, now that's powerful stuff, but unfortunately, time is racing. So thanks very much for that call. I hope to see you tomorrow at 4:40 at Fact in Liverpool. Alan McHugh has tweeted, Owen Smith, imagine him with his finger on the nuclear button. Good God, that's a frightening thought. Paul the Builder says, Owen Smith in the ISIS talks, he'd probably do a buffet with little name tags. Round table, a dinner party with ISIS, with Owen Smith on the menu. Crumbs says, Owen Smith is desperate for power, his power, and he'll say anything for power. Daniel Fraser says, Owen Smith and ISIS, because it was a stupid idea, there can never be peace with a death cult that requires eradication. Amen, I say. C. Mac 59 says, yet the Western NATO and EU powers won't engage with Russia to ease tensions in the Ukraine and Crimea. Getting lots and lots of SMS and tweets. Mr. Galloway, with the greatest respect, eventually someone will have to speak to ISIS, just like we have done with the Taliban. Peter in Glasgow, you're just wrong about that, Peter. The Taliban had demands that could be negotiated. Their demands concerned only their own country, Afghanistan, which is not our country. ISIS have no demands that can possibly be negotiated. Their demand is for the demise or conversion of everyone in the world who does not see the world their way. And that cannot be negotiated by definition. They are head choppers, heart eaters, crucifiers, mass murderers, killing thousands of people in cold blood with knives that they use to cut their heads off. They destroy churches. They destroy mosques that don't have allegiance to them. They are the night, and we will not go quietly into that night.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A new kind of talk radio. We'll get you talking. Talk radio.
It's the mother of all talk shows, and in the next hour, we're talking about savage dogs. And I don't mean the leadership contenders for UKIP. I don't mean Wally, Owen Smith. I don't mean Trump. They're all later. It's the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
We'll get you talking, but only if you call me. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. You can text me. Talk 87222. That'll cost you 25 pence plus normal sending charges. Or you can tweet me for free at Talk Radio or at George Galloway. It's the mother of all talk shows.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Okay, let me level with you. They are barking mad. People who keep dangerous dogs. People who put or allow dangerous dogs in proximity to vulnerable people, like the 3-year-old child that was mauled to death yesterday by an American bulldog, a picture of which I have just seen on the television, and it made my blood run cold. But it made that baby's blood run hot. It mauled him to death. And earlier in the week, a grown man was killed by a cross between a Labrador and a Staffordshire Terrier, which presumably, I'm not an expert on dogs, meant it had everything that a Terrier has, but a larger size like a Labrador has, and it killed a grown man. As a father of, by the grace of God, several young children, dogs terrify me. I've been attacked by a dog. By a woman that said, "He'll not touch you, son," just as it leapt onto my chest, knocking me backwards over a hedge. And if we hadn't been interrupted by a brave person, then that dog might have taken my life. So I have a very, very hard line on dogs. I don't know why you have them, but if you're going to have them, you better make sure they're muzzled in public places. We could work it out. Any dog beyond a certain weight would have to be muzzled. That way nothing can go wrong. No child can be killed. no person can be mauled, and certain breeds need to be outlawed. There's no case for them. Now, that's my point of view. It's probably not the point of view, although I'm just guessing that, of Trevor Cooper. He's a solicitor and an expert in the law pertaining to dogs. Trevor, thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, hi, George.
What's your overall observation on the 2 cases this week of deaths by dogs?
Well, perhaps what it shows us above all else is that there has been a failure of the Dangerous Dogs Act from 1991. The idea of that act was to prevent incidents, and patently it isn't working, and perhaps it's time that the government held a full review.
And what, if you were in the government or giving evidence to the government, what would you suggest to that review?
Well, I've got 3 ideas, really. One is to look elsewhere for ideas and learn from others' experiences. So, for example, Scotland has gone their own way and introduced dog control notices. So it's a form of early intervention. So if a dog isn't under proper control and it's causing alarm or fear, then an authorised council officer can impose controls. Well, that seems to me to be a sensible idea. So perhaps we can look at what Scotland are doing. Does it work there? And if it does, let's bring that down here. But more than that, we need to look at breeders. Clearly, there's a lot of dogs in this country. We've got about 8 million or thereabouts. We do have backstreet breeders, we have puppy farmers, and I wonder what kind of controls they're imposing on themselves when they sell dogs. So what kind of tests are they checking to make sure that someone who's getting a dog from them is appropriate? So, for example, if you get a dog from a reputable breeder, if you get a dog from a reputable charity or a rescue, they're going to check out the buyer. They're going to make sure that this is somebody who's capable of looking after that dog. Whereas someone perhaps who is a backstreet breeder, puppy farmer, they don't care, they just want the money. So perhaps the time has come to put more controls on breeders and to increase the licensing regime. And thirdly, what can we do with the owners themselves? Clearly it would be nice if every single dog owner got their dog trained and socialised, but perhaps we just need to start with the basics and get these messages drummed home at schools. So perhaps we should be looking at our education system and perhaps put it in the national curriculum so that children are more dog-wise. It's not just about when they own dogs. We want to make sure that children are safe around dogs. And this is a good lesson to start with at school.
Well, all of those, of course, are sensible suggestions, but my question is more fundamental, really. Why do these dogs exist? What's the purpose of a potentially savage, powerful, dangerous dog?
Well, any dog is capable of biting. I was speaking to a behaviourist friend of mine the other day, and she reckons she could train a chihuahua to be dangerous. Well,
sure, but that could only bite your ankle, Trev.
Well, yeah, but that's still an injury.
Well, yeah, but it's not a death.
Right, okay. Well, are you just concerned with the tiny number of death cases? I'm concerned.
Serious maulings and deaths. Yes, I confess, I'm more concerned with those than a chihuahua nipping your ankle. Yes.
Right. Well, the smallest dog that has killed somebody in this country is a Jack Russell. So they're small dogs. So we shouldn't just look at size. Battersea Cats and Dogs Home did a survey of behaviourists just 3 weeks ago to find out why the behaviourists tell us that some dogs might attack. And they went to 215 behaviourists. So it's a pretty good selection of experts on why dogs do as dogs do. And 74% of those behaviourists told Battersea that the breed really isn't down to why a dog is likely to attack. So 74% of them reckon the breed was either irrelevant or slightly important. And by far the greater relevance was the way the dog had been brought up by the breeder and the way that it was brought up by the owner. So these are the experts. I mean, it's all well and good to become emotive, and I do appreciate that clearly this is a very emotive issue. But we need to be based on science, we need to be based on evidence, and this is what the behaviourists are telling us, and these are the kind of things I would like the government to look at when they hold their review.
Well, Of course, I hear your note of caution, and it's apposite, no doubt. But the point is, some dogs, if they do go bad, are potentially fatal, and other dogs, if they do go bad, are potentially ankle nippers. And there's a very significant difference in the power of these, and we know the kind of dogs that we're talking about. I don't necessarily know all their names, but like the camel, they may be difficult to define, but they're easy to recognize. I have 3 young children, 9, 5, and 2. I cannot go to a park without the danger of a big, powerful dog that's been let off the leash in that park coming towards these children. And if the children are not terrified, I certainly am, Trevor. I'm terrified about how I'm going to protect my small children from this dog that some idiot... Now, one last point, and I'll let you back in. It's true that it's mainly the owners to blame. But, of course, if they couldn't get that dog, then the problem wouldn't arise. It's true that it's usually rum-looking characters. Characters you certainly wouldn't want calling to take your daughter out on a date, who have these kind of dogs. There must be some way of stopping these people getting these kind of dogs, surely.
But we've tried breed-specific legislation. We've had that for 25 years. And back in 1991, the government at that stage decided there were 4 types of dog that posed a threat to public safety. So those dogs were banned. Yet this is 25 years on. We are still seeing incidents. So breed-specific legislation just does not work.
But they're not really banned, are they? They've just kind of mutated. Mutations of those banned dogs are still plentiful.
Between 1991 and 1997, it was mandatory destruction for the dog unless it had been exempted before the cut-off date in 1997. Thereafter, so post-97, the dog was only allowed to live if a court decided that the dog wasn't a danger to public safety. Now, it seems to me if a court is satisfied that a dog isn't a risk to the public, then it's entirely right and proper that that dog should be allowed back home. It seems to me to be entirely wrong a dog is put down if it doesn't pose a threat.
Don't you think you're over-concerned about dogs?
No, I don't.
I mean, a 3-year-old child was just mauled to death by one. It would be... I was hoping from you for a little more humility, a little more recognition of the danger of these dogs.
Well, on that one occasion, completely accept that's a tragedy, and clearly we don't want those kind of tragedies to be repeated. So what I'm trying to put forward are measures to make sure that these incidents can't be repeated. But what we've had up until now hasn't worked, so we need new thinking. Going back to old thinking of breed-specific legislation, to me, doesn't seem the right way.
Well, I don't agree, but I'm glad you came on to argue your corner. Trevor Cooper, a solicitor and an expert in the law pertaining to dogs. If the last legislation hasn't worked, we need more draconian legislation. If we didn't ban enough breeds, we need to ban more breeds. If we didn't insist on muzzling then, we should insist on muzzling now. Now, of course, the muzzling wouldn't have saved that child yesterday, 3 years of age. My own latest child is getting on for 3, he's over 2. The idea of an American bulldog mauling my child, mauling that child to death, makes my blood run cold. Now, of course, a muzzle wouldn't have saved that child, because it wasn't out in public. But I'm telling you that I have to resist my children's wish to go to a park, which is a park for people, because of the number of powerful dogs that could harm them, that instantly zero in on children running around and playing with a ball. This is a serious matter, this. And no one is treating it seriously enough. including the dog lobby. Now, Tony Hughes says, Molly would like to assure you that it's never the dog which is the problem. It's always the owner. And it's accompanied by a photograph of a powerful dog of the kind of which I speak. Now, Tony, it isn't true that it's never the dog which is the problem, but you're probably right. It's usually the case that it's the owner that's the problem. But if the owner couldn't have the dog, the problem disappears. Don't you see? Don't you see my point? Of course, there's a lot of trash, human trash, going around with powerful dogs. Of course. But if they couldn't go around with the powerful dogs, well, they'd just be sad, pathetic individuals. Richie Gilbertson says, dogs and young kids should be kept separated. Idiots never learn. Yeah, but the child was only 3. Salman Bai says, George Galloway on Talk Radio is absolutely top-notch. Brilliant. Thanks for that, my friend. Gary, still rolling, says those who keep dangerous dogs are a danger to everyone. They can't control themselves, let alone a mad dog, usually. Indeed. Keith says the legislation for dogs came out of the backside of Parliament, and that is the other problem with dogs and where the byproduct is left. That's another point about dogs, what they leave behind. Alice says, what about a pack of chihuahuas acting like piranhas? It's not a laughing matter, Alice. Ty says maybe we could make it that you need a license to keep certain dogs. Well, that's one way of doing it, but it would have to be more than 7 and 6, and it would have to be more than give me the 7 and 6 and here's your license. It would have to be a serious examination on why you need that dangerous dog. Why do you need it? What house are you going to keep it in? What's your track record on looking after dogs? You see, that's the problem. A lot of these dogs are maltreated, kept in circumstances that aren't suitable for them. I'm going on too much. I'm howling at the moon here. My blood's up, I'll tell you.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
We'll be talking about you later, Mr. Little Hands. But first, let's talk to Fraser in Bolton on dogs. Fraser, welcome to the show.
Good evening, George.
Good evening to you, sir.
Right, well, you hit the nail right on the head there about this kind of a proper dog licensing act. About 12 years ago, I did a rush of blood to the head and adopted a wee brown dog, no discernible pedigree, from Manchester Dogs Home. Mm-hmm. And the Dangerous Dogs Act was in place then, I know that far back. And in the 12 years since, when I take him out in a lead, always in a lead in public, and even if he wouldn't harm a fly anyway, I feel like a walking tin of kennel meat for the various beasts that are in, shall we say,
yes,
not so good hands.
The bigger dogs, yeah.
He's moderate size. Packs of staffies. There's a dog nearby who's routinely walked by a 14-year-old boy, and it is half Rottweiler in size with the markings of a Staffordshire. It's like a tiger from hell. Now, there's no way this child could control it. I mean, what's the point? What's the need of a guy living in a terraced house in Bolton to have a Japanese fighting dog? That's another one.
That's just ridiculous, Fraser.
It's preposterous.
It's utterly ridiculous. The law is an ass. If you lived on a ranch in Texas, that would be an indulgence. But if you're living in a terraced house in Bolton, why on earth would you or should you be allowed to have a Japanese fighting dog?
Exactly, and I'm a dog owner, and I'm the one who's saying I don't feel safe taking my dog out for a walk because I become a target.
Yeah.
Because I've got him. So what about there's small children out there? It's ridiculous. So it's quite easy to implement. It's the finance behind it, but that's just a whole other government issue.
Well, but you could finance it through the license fee, Fraser. Yeah. If there's 8 million dogs, if you made the license a decent price, mm-hmm. that would give you a lot of revenue from which you could employ the inspectors and the various staff that you would have to satisfy as to your reasons for wanting a Japanese fighting dog in your terraced house in Bolton.
Well, there you go. Common sense at last, George.
Yeah.
Make it happen. It's very simple.
It is, but we've got a dog lobby, you see, and I'm getting flooded now with tweets and texts from them. We've got a dog lobby that effectively dodge the question by talking about the human individuals who are lacking, who are the reason for the dog going bad. Even if I accept that entirely, which I don't actually. But if they couldn't get the dog, then the problem doesn't arise.
Exactly. No, that's it. And it's, as you say, if it's funded properly, it's quite easy to implement. And it's not you being anti-dog. That's a stupid thing for people to say.
Yeah.
Absolute nonsense. Dogs are lovely creatures if they're in the right hands. You've just got to stop them getting into the wrong hands.
Exactly. Fraser, thanks for that. Good call. Sensible call. Tom is in Enfield. On you go, Tom.
Hello there, sir.
Hello, sir. Go ahead.
Thanks for having me. I hope I'm singing from the same hymn sheet as your good self.
Well, it's all right if you're not. Don't worry. As long as you've got a sensible point.
I also apologise if it's not all that constructive. I could not care less about anything than I do about dogs. Ban all dogs. Ban all owners. I don't know about you, when you are in the park with your children and your lovely family, there are all these dogs wandering around the place, wherever the owners are. And, I mean, of course, when I say ban all dogs, if they're dangerous dogs, even more so ban them.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, if you're in the park with your children, all these dogs wandering, milling about the place, come up to you and your family, sniffing you. Excuse me, sir, madam, I don't love your dog as much as you do. Get the damn thing away from me, please.
Well, that's right. But, of course, often the dogs are with people who are unable to get them back under control. If you've got a big dog, it's quite hard, especially if it's a kid that's out walking the dog, as it often is.
Yeah.
It's quite, I mean, and then you see, as I said, I've got 3 young children. So a dog comes running towards them. Maybe they scatter. The dog's going after one, then the other, then the other. How do I pick up my kids? How do I get them out of the way of this dangerous dog?
And then often, I don't know if you've had this, George, you'll find the owner saying silly things to the children like, oh, don't worry, he's a good boy.
Oh, it's always, he'll not touch your son.
He won't bite. This is a child. They're not going to understand that.
Exactly. Exactly. Tom, good call. Thanks for that. The 9 Dublin says George Galloway is absolutely right about dangerous dogs. B. McGovern says, thank you, George Galloway, for dog talk. I have no garden in London flat, but I do not go to the park opposite due to dogs who always approach. Gillian Warrior says, I usually agree with you, but breed has got nothing to do with it. It's supervision and the owner's fault, 100%. Even if that were true, Gillian, and I don't accept that it's true, if they didn't have the dog, their lack of supervision would not be an issue. Paddy McIntyre says, became a cultural, trendy thing with some people to keep dangerous dogs. Trouble is, they can't always control them. Indeed. B. McGovern says it's a dog's life, all right. George Galloway, they have more freedom than us. Great talk show tonight, dealing with the real issues. Another lady says, dog in the next flat barks all day. Dog down in the neighbour's garden barks us awake daily. Can't go to the park as dogs run up. Lou Sweet says, very true. The amount of stupidity that's involved when someone gets seriously injured is just beyond ridiculous. And have I got time to read some more? I kind of do. Cool Daddy says, I agree completely. Bring back well-priced dog licenses. Should have been debated in Parliament. Venetian Blind says, would you vet the potential owners? Yes, I would. The presumption, the default position should be that you may not have a Japanese fighting dog in your terraced house in Bolton. That should be the default position. And you should have to persuade me, the state, as to why you should. Lou Sweet says, bingo, bingo, first-time owners should take a test to see whether or not they are ready for one. Well, it's been a fantastically spirited debate. It's certainly got the blood coursing in my veins. tell me how it was for you. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call me. And you can text us and you can tweet us at George Galloway or at Talk Radio.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, coming up later in the programme, you're fired! Donald Trump has had a reshuffle in his campaign team. Not the first one, probably not the last. We'll talk to The Guardian's David Smith in Washington to get the latest. And also, as I said earlier, after 10, it's the best of Ian Lee. You really should listen to Ian. It's a terrific show. And Sunday morning, Jake Yap is live from Edinburgh, chatting to Stuart Goldsmith, Larry Dean, and Paul Flannery, among others. Tune in from 8, only on Talk Radio. Now, a picture appeared in the newspapers this morning. It was not a dead child, not even a particularly severely injured child, but it was a picture that melted the heart. A picture of a little Syrian boy sat alone in an ambulance, his face caked in dust and blood. He had been the victim, as so many have, of aerial bombardment, which had destroyed much around him in the horrific 5-year conflict in Syria. I want to talk to Christian Benedict of Amnesty International's Crisis Response Unit, and he's the manager for Syria. Christian, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, George.
Now, this child was the victim of regime or Russian bombardment. Of course, a day earlier, it could have been a victim of the bombardment from the other side. These children, these civilians, are trapped in the crossfire of all this, aren't they?
Certainly, children, civilians, men, women are the main victims of what's happening inside Syria. Certainly, those with the aircraft, in particular the Russians and the Syrian government, who have been targeting civilian areas, have been targeting civilian objects like hospitals, need to be restrained. They need to be told that this is not acceptable, that the victims of their operations against, as they say, terrorists, are predominantly civilians like the child you mentioned.
And what are the American, British and French and Saudi and Kuwaiti and Jordanian and other aircraft dropping? Are they dropping candy floss?
No, and I think you know very well they're not dropping candy floss. There's a lot of states who are operating in the air of Syria, and a lot of civilians are dying. And to bring it back to your opening comments, which was quite right, it's civilians who are being caught up and targeted, and it's where those civilians are being deliberately targeted, where known civilian areas and known civilian objects like hospitals are being consistently and deliberately targeted. And you may know Amnesty International has researched this extensively. We found the Russians to be targeting these civilian areas and civilian objects like hospitals. That's what needs to stop.
So no hospitals have been bombed by us?
Who is us?
The West.
George, I'm speaking here as Amnesty International. The primary focus for us is civilian protection.
No, I've got you. I know exactly.
I don't class Amnesty as the West as being part of the US.
No. But anyone listening to this already has worked out that you are blaming primarily the Syrian regime and its Russian allies. And I'm asking you a very simple question. Have none of the bombs dropped by the myriad of countries in the air who are operating against the Syrian regime and the Russians, have none of their bombs killed civilians?
Of course they have. And Amnesty have commented on that, condemned that, and we're pressing all those states who are claiming to be against the Syrian government to improve their rules of engagement, to comply with international humanitarian law. I don't see what that has to do with the child you're mentioning, it's quite clear in this instance that this was most likely a Russian jet. So let's bring it back to the issue of civilian protection. Absolutely, those states in the West, as you might want to call them, have killed civilians. I don't think there's any dispute about that. But I don't think, that takes, and it certainly doesn't take away any responsibility that the Russian government and the Syrian government have for also protecting civilians.
Well, I accept that entirely. And wouldn't it be better if we weren't continuing this war?
Well, I don't know you'd have to spell out what that means. I mean, are you calling for a ceasefire? Are you calling for peace talks to end the war? Are you calling for more intervention to end the war? The question of how to end the war has been taxing the minds of the so-called international community and the totally failing Security Council for like you say, some 5 years.
Well, it hasn't, Christian, with respect. It hasn't been taxing their mind. The American government daily declares that regime change in Damascus must happen, and that they are putting in weapons and materiel, including these jets of which I speak, in order to bring that regime change about. That's illegal. Why can't Amnesty International say so?
Well, that's nothing to do with Amnesty's involvement in the situation in Syria. Amnesty's involvement is to protect civilians. Now, it's right to say that a huge amount of Syrians don't want the Assad regime. It's right to say a huge amount of Syrians took to the streets before this was an armed conflict to demand a change to the Syrian government, or the regime as you're calling it. It's absolutely their right to do that. They don't have a government where there's regular, free, credible elections. And, under this particular government, there's no chance of having that. I think you must be able to see that. So they did take to the streets. They got shot down. And we are in the situation where we are now.
Yes, well, let's look at where we are now. We are in this place now, where 100,000 foreign fanatics, owing allegiance to Al-Qaeda and ISIS, who've come from every corner of the earth, are cutting the heads off small children. And if you like, although you wouldn't, I can show you the video. Because they put it out themselves. Well, why don't I hear more vibe from you about that?
Well, you can go and search on Amnesty's website and you can see the video. You can see the press release you put out about it, the group we named, and the actions that need to be taken. But the point around civilian protection, civilians aren't going to be protected by consistently pointing to the bogeymen of ISIS.
Well, you call them bogeymen. You see, I call them heart-eaters and head choppers.
Yeah, I know you do. I'm aware of that, George. But the reality is, if you do genuinely want to end the conflict, you also have to listen to the vast majority of Syrians.
How dare you speak for the vast majority of Syrians?
I'm not speaking.
What do you know about the opinions of the vast majority of Syrians?
George, if you want to have a conversation, you'll stop interrupting me. You'll have to listen.
Don't you tell me how I'll conduct my conversation with you.
Okay, well, sure, fine. But if you want a response, you'll have to listen.
You said that the vast majority of Syrians want to see the end of the regime.
No, I said the vast majority. There's a vast majority of Syrians who outnumber the jihadists, or the head choppers, as you like to call them. Those are the people to listen to. Some people call them the silent majority, whatever. But if there is to be a resolution to this brutal conflict, if the UN process, Geneva, works, there is the likelihood of having UN-administered elections. That's the midpoint of the Geneva process. The jihadists are not going to vote in elections. Obviously, we know that. But you cannot say that a huge amount of Syrians do not want to see an end to conflict and regular free elections. Go back to early 2011 and the decades before the uprising in March, people wanted reform. They wanted democracy.
I'm just interested in how you're such an expert on what the Syrian people want. Leaving aside the question of what it's got to do with you, Why are you?
George? You introduced me as the person who manages our Syria work.
Yes.
So
there's more than 20.
Probably comes into that as well.
There's more than 20 million Syrians. You presume to know what the political views are of that 20 million Syrians.
George, do you know there's a really, really good test to assess where Syrians, who Syrians would like to rule them? Do you know there's a really good test for this? Do you know what it is?
Tell me.
Do you know regular, free, credible elections?
I absolutely agree with you on that.
Are you telling me that the elections under this Assad and the previous Assad were credible, free and fair?
None of them were credible. None of them were. Listen to me for a minute. None of them were credible, free or fair. I'm in favour of credible, free and fair elections, not just in Syria, in Syria. But in those countries that you can laugh.
Saudi Arabia should have an election first before the Syrians can have an election.
No. You can laugh. No, you can laugh and you can scoff. But Saudi Arabian jets are bombing Syria for democracy.
Go back to that point of where there's actually a little bit of agreement between you and I, George. Credible, free, fair elections.
Yes.
Why is Assad blocking credible, free and fair elections?
Maybe because there's 100,000 foreign head-chopping, heart-eating fanatics tearing the country apart. Might that be a reason?
No. Was there 100,000 foreign head-chopping fanatics tearing the country apart in the year 2000, in the year 2005, in 2011?
No, there wasn't.
There wasn't, George.
No, there wasn't. Syria was a Syria was
preventing the self-determination of the Syrian people, the right to have regular, free, fair elections. Why does the Assad regime maintain this network of death camps where people are being tortured, where the imposition of fear and terror from the state?
Well, it's quite clear, Christian. Your passion is telling and noted, but the years 2000, 2005, 2010, you're quite right to say. There was not 100,000 foreign extremists, head-chopping, heart-eating extremists in Syria then. You're quite right. And elections ought to have been held in those years. But in 2016, undeniably, there is. Therefore, the answer to your question as to why there is not a free and fair election in Syria this year is because of the presence and the destruction wrought by that 100,000 gang of head choppers.
Nonsense, George. Utter nonsense.
Is it? Tell me why.
It's utter nonsense, George, because if you want a resolution, you focus on what will bring about a resolution that not only protects civilians, but ensures the rights of all Syrians, whether they are supportive of Assad.
Why can't you tell, Christian, why can't you tell the 100,000 foreign beheaders to get out of Syria? Why don't you call for that?
I think if you want to get one of your researchers to see what we
I have no researchers, but I have been listening to you. I have been listening to you for the last 8 minutes, and you haven't once.
Listen a little bit more then.
Then say so. Say so.
We put out a report about and a campaign about the abuses of those groups which are opposed to the Syrian government. We named the groups, we highlighted the types of atrocities they're committing. We are lobbying various governments to restrain these groups. Now, we are doing
Why restrain them? Why don't you demand that they get out of Syria? They have no right to be there.
Well, I mean, there's lots of these people are Syrian themselves.
Some of them are Syrian, but according to the United States government, 100,000 of them, 100,000 of them are foreigners. Will you now demand that they get out of Syria?
Okay,
it's quite simple, really.
Go back to a report we issued in 2013 about ISIS. When ISIS were not by a lot of people, including some Syrians, seen as the threat that some people, that we all know they are, I should say. We saw them as the threat from the earliest days. We put out a report saying it's not just about taking on the foot soldiers. And yes, right, most of them are foreign. It's not just about taking on the foot soldiers. You have to go after the financiers and the facilitators. And those are not all in Syria. We named the countries like Kuwait, like Turkey, like Libya, all the transit points. So we have been doing that that research and that campaigning against those groups. And it's absolutely right that legitimate, proportionate action, military action, as well as law enforcement action, can and should be taken against those individuals and groups that are harming civilians. It must be done, though, according to international humanitarian law. Now, Putin and Assad bombing hospitals is not helping that cause, and it's taken us further and further and further away from a resolution pathway that does actually give all Syrians a voice in credible elections.
Okay, thanks very much. Christian Benedict of Amnesty International making his position quite clear, and we'll continue that discussion after some capitalist messages.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio! Galloway, celebrate! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
0844 499 1000. That's the number to call me. Or you can tweet either me, George Galloway, or Talk Radio. And Lisa Hill says, I think Owen Smith should be sent to Syria for a conference with ISIS. Tell him, oh no, I'm not going to say the next bit. Lisa, it's too gruesome. Stoke City FC says they just think they're hard when they walk around with them, just like the Staffy shell suit brigade. Do they still wear shell suits? Does that fellow Anton Deck wear a shell suit? Do shell suits still exist? Wally Smith is but a pawn in the chess game, says Exposition. He's unaware of this. His future will be in pantomimes. But at which end of the pantomime horse, I ask? P. McCabe says it's clear that Owen Smith are at odds with the Labour Party's members and values. And Abdul Khalik Abba says the question still remains is who is funding these extremists and selling weapons to them. Indeed so. Here's Peter in Wigan on Syria. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, hi, George.
Hi, mate.
Nice to be back on. I spoke to you last week.
Okay, you're welcome.
Like to make it as quick as I can. I'm disgusted with the chap you had on before, Christian, from Amnesty International. I actually was a member of Amnesty for 6 months, and I was so disgusted at their conduct and the way that they defended Israel and the West and demonized Eastern Europe and all the rest of them. Now, what he's saying is that this picture of this child is a product of Russian bombing. Not true. This child and the thousands, hundreds of thousands of other children who have actually not been as lucky and they've died, they are a product of the USA Zionist conspiracy, otherwise known as the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which anybody can Google. That's Wolfowitz, W-O-L-F-O-W-I-T-Z, doctrine, which was a Zionist doctrine conducted by the USA to destabilize the whole of the Middle East, Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe. And as far as they're concerned, the operation is continuing. They've failed in Syria so far because Russia has intervened. And let's face up to the facts. The Assad regime is not perfect. We know that, and no perfect regime could control a country so dysfunctional or so diverse with all the different political and religious groups. But the Assad regime, what a lot of people choose to ignore, it's a secular regime where Muslims, Sunnis, Shiites, Alawites, and Druze, and even Jews were living, and millions of Christians, by the way, were living peacefully in Syria.
Well, look, Peter, every Christian is clinging to the garment of the Syrian regime. Every Christian is desperately terrified at the danger of a victory for the head-chopping, heart-eating fanatics. So think about that. Thanks, Peter. John is in Chorley in Lancashire. He wants to talk about something else, but it is also something that is of import to me. It's BHS and Sir, for the moment, Philip Green. Go ahead, John.
Good evening, George. Nice to speak to you, mate.
And you,
First time caller. I never voted on the EU because that could have been put on the back burner. This thing with BHS and all these big businesses, this guy is a criminal to me of the highest order. I have worked my life, 50 years working, 72 years of age, and I've never known criminality like this. This guy has raped that company of its profits. Give his wife a £400 million bonus, bought a yacht for £100 million.
She doesn't pay tax, of course, because she coincidentally lives in Monaco on a yacht.
Exactly.
Where,
exactly,
of course,
George.
there are no taxes.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely deplorable. I just can't believe it. This guy is a bigger gangster to me than the great train robbers put together. This guy is unbelievable.
At least
he's sailing around the Greek islands now on the back of BHS's money.
On one of his 3 yachts. At least Dick Turpin wore a mask. And he didn't get called Sir. They never knighted Sir Dick Turpin.
How much longer are we going to allow gangsters in big business? We also have them in the oil companies as well, and they pay themselves millions and millions of pounds bonuses and millions of pounds salary. Also bankers. Yeah, this guy is Jewish, by the way. Which
that's nothing to do with it.
That.
That's the best thing you can say about him, that he's Jewish. Andrew is in Helens Bay in the north of Ireland. Andrew, go ahead.
How are you, George?
I'm good, thank you.
Yes, I would just like to discuss, I'll get back onto Syria in a minute, but I'd just like to discuss mainstream media. They can talk as much rubbish about Corbyn as they want. They can bring on Alistair Campbell, Peter Mandelson, and all the right-wing journalists to slag him off.
So he didn't know Anton Deck. And I don't know, I know I've got the zeitgeist, but I've never heard of Anton Deck.
And neither have I, to be honest.
Go on yourself, Andrew.
But, they can sink to a standard of debate up to a point lower than the bottom of the Great Barrier Reef. Him sitting on the train floor and making it headline news. At the end of the day, Jeremy's going to win, and will win comfortably.
For sure he is, yeah. For sure he is. Go on. Tell me about Syria.
Also, on Syria, yes. Why can't we work with Russia instead of imposing sanctions
Well,
on them?
Andrew, that is the question that obliterates all their bleating about suffering children and hospitals being bombed. If they sincerely wanted to crush ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they would be teaming up with Russia and with the government of Syria and with the government of Iraq in order to crush them. The fact that they won't do so and maintain a propaganda barrage through their tame NGOs and their media echo chamber gives the lie to the claim that they are against Al-Qaeda and against ISIS.
I know. What we should do is remove the sanctions off Russia that we imposed on them after the Crimea crisis, work with them, and then stop selling our arms to these jihadist militants that we are currently doing so at the minute.
We're selling arms to Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states that then get, without even taken out of their packing cases, get sent to Syria, put into the hands of so-called moderate rebels who are A, not moderate, B, may well defect in the morning to ISIS or Al-Qaeda, or C, have the weapons taken off them by ISIS and Al-Qaeda, as the sender knew full well would happen when they sent them.
Yes, the photo of that child, like that refugee that was washed up on that beach, broke my heart, so it did. But our governments, UK and US, pretend to sympathise with them whenever they're the ones who are causing them to be refugees and make the dangerous journeys to Europe and having to escape the violence that they're currently facing there. As you've said previously, a little knowledge is dangerous, and our governments have little knowledge of the sensitive nature that is the Middle East. Well
said, Andrew. Excellent. Thanks very much for that call. Now, I've got 1 hour left, and my number is 0844 499 1000, or you can tweet me at George Galloway or at Talk Radio. Simon G. James, looking fine on a mortarboard and cloak, says Western policy has gone from disgusting to absurd to dangerous insanity. I couldn't have put that better myself, Simon. Someone on SMS, no name, just a phone number, which obviously I won't run out, has talked about dogs leading blind people through difficult situations, sniffing out drugs, and doing all the things that good dogs can do. And then, as she says, you hear this 3-year-old boy was killed by a dog. It makes me so sad. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Across the UK, online and on DAB. Access all radios.
Talk Radio. Give it some lip. Talk Radio.
It's the mother of all talk shows because it's Friday night and it's Talk Radio. With me, George Galloway, from 7 till 10. We're talking Trump in the next hour and dangerous dogs. They're not necessarily the same thing. Neither is the leadership of UKIP.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
It's the mother of all talk shows, all right. And it's raging tonight on everything from dangerous dogs to Donald Trump. Now, come to think of it, that's not that great. A span. Neither are his hands. Have you seen them? He has the daintiest hands on a man I have ever seen. I'm making no allusions, you understand. I'll be talking to David Smith, The Guardian's US correspondent, about the new turn in Donald Trump's presidential campaign.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, Donald Trump has decided on a change of tack. Having roundly insulted, traduced, smeared and slandered just about every group in the United States, including women broadcasters and ethnic minorities and women in general and Mexicans and everybody that you could think of has been insulted and slandered by Donald Trump. But this week, he decided on a new tack. He decided to say, I'm sorry. For him, it wasn't the hardest word. But will it work? Let's talk to an expert. David Smith, who is a Guardian correspondent and is studying, of course, the US election and Trump's change in tactics and change in staff. David, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. I cannot claim to be an expert on Trump because, of course, no one is an expert on Trump.
Even Trump.
We've all been wrong about him all along, but I'll try.
Yes, exactly. But what you are an expert in is reading the runes of the US public and its public opinion and so on. What has been the impact of Trump's decision to say, I'm sorry?
You know, it's I haven't seen any opinion polls yet in direct response to that. I mean, when he made this, for him, unprecedented expression of regret at a rally, it seemed to go down well with the crowd there. There was some cheers, but then, to be honest, pretty much everything he says at those rallies, they tend to be aimed at the faithful, and they're always generally supportive. There's been a few other changes too, and Paul Manafort, his campaign manager, resigned today. So there is a real sense.
He had already been sidelined, hadn't he, David? He'd been sort of superseded, but was still on the masthead, and now he's gone.
Exactly. It had been on the cards for a couple of days because Trump hired a new campaign chief executive, actually a guy from the media who runs a...
Well, you say media. He was the head of the crazed war dog that is called Breitbart.
Exactly, which is a very extreme
set up that have certainly been accused of inciting anti-Muslim sentiment and being pretty out there. It must be said, not a mainstream media outlet by any means. He hired another strategist as well, and so yes, really, the writing was on the wall for Paul Manafort, who had some troubles of his own in terms of revelations of his relationship with politicians, pro-Russian politicians in Ukraine, and general sort of shady dealings, supportive of Vladimir Putin. It was remarked really that in any normal year, any normal candidate, Manafort would have had to resign several days or even weeks ago. Of course, Trump defies most logic, but this time it did make sense for Manafort to go because he was too much of a distraction. And really, I think what this is mostly about is, Trump wants to be Trump. It worked very well for him in the Republican primaries. Paul Manafort tried to introduce a bit more sort of conventional politics into it, but Trump doesn't like that, and he wants to be his own man, whether it succeeds or fails. And just to give you one example of that, there was a moment where Trump was eating some tacos, which he saw as a way of
an olive branch to the Mexicans.
Exactly, yes, and he thought it'd be a great idea to publish a photo of this on Twitter of him eating this meal. Paul Manafort was the one, reportedly, who said, look, this is just going to look patronizing and you're going to be mocked for it. But Trump went ahead and did it anyway. And that's just, I think, one little revealing example of how, Trump doesn't want to be constrained by conventional political advice.
Well, Trump being Trump definitely got him this far. But the polls seem to indicate, at least the polls I've seen, you may know better, that it's not going to be enough to win the presidential election. Is that still, or has it ever been, but is it still your take on things?
I think that's fair enough, yes. Trump being himself was very successful in the Republican primaries, but I think that was partly to do with who he was up against and who he was appealing to, and he's got a core constituency among generally white men, often lower middle class or working class. But it's when I've been to his rallies, there's no doubt they are incredibly enthusiastic and vocal in their support for him, and that base, I think, will be unmoved by any kind of gaffes he makes. However, the bottom line is that America is increasingly diverse. African Americans, Latinos, and Trump is also extremely unpopular with women. And when you add all those up, his core support are just going to put him in maybe the high 30s, low 40s percentage-wise, but just not enough up against Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. And he's last few weeks he's made enough missteps that he's lost too many moderate Republicans and too many independents. And so now in some opinion polls he's trailing by double digits and even looking in jeopardy in what once seemed to be safe Republican states such as Georgia.
Now, Michael Moore today, who had earlier, I should say, predicted that Trump would defeat Clinton, is now saying that Trump doesn't really want to be president. Is there something in that having got to be the Republican nominee for president is kind of enough to put his name up in the kind of lights he wants it to be?
There's always been that nagging suspicion from the beginning that this entire thing was a reality TV stunt that got out of control or a very smart business and marketing venture. But I ultimately don't really believe it. I mean, he has put in a huge amount of work. He's campaigning around the country, and he said in interviews that, if he doesn't win, this whole thing will be a waste of time. So I think he does want to be president when you sort of look at his life and the things he said during this this campaign. However, I think if he does lose, then it will be a convenient fallback, perhaps to say, well, he wasn't that bothered anyway. In the same way that he's already creating a convenient fallback by trying to plant a lot of seeds that say, this election is going to be rigged and that the Democrats are going to cheat. So, he's getting his excuses in early. And, this week's appointment of Steve Bannon from Breitbart News has led to some speculation that if he does lose the election, we could see the formation of a new media company, almost a merger, if you like, of Trump and Breitbart.
My God,
that could be the thing that
we're talking Frankenstein now, David.
Indeed.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much indeed. That was David Smith, the Guardian reporter, who is following in the United States the presidential election campaign. I think next week we need to hear from John Le Boutillier, get an update on where things stand. Of course, all the negatives that I have reflected this evening about Donald Trump are equal when it comes to Hillary Clinton. So don't imagine that because I'm against Trump, I'm for Hillary Clinton, because that would be wrong. Photo 2021 says we would not be surprised. Owen Smith is a career idiot, and boy, does it show. Pashtun and Pro says Amnesty has lost every bit of credibility left, and he includes what seems to be a poster on a bus shelter, a kind of pro-NATO message from Amnesty International. Well, I've never respected them, ever. Keith says, who controls our beloved army? Hedge funds or captains? Recruitment, rations, bases are all being flogged off. Well, there you go. You've read Catch-22, Milo Minderbender, and all that. Gary, still rolling, says, and one of the richest pair of hands to boot. Don't make you a good person, though, having loads of dollars. Usually the opposite, sadly. Well, here's my theory, Gary. My theory is that Donald Trump is actually not all that rich. And that's the reason why he's refusing to publish his tax returns, because they will show that he pays not that much tax, and not for the usual reason, but for the reason that actually he's a fraud, he's a phony, he's not a billionaire, he's never been a billionaire. He's left a trail of financial wreckage across the United States for decades, and some wreckage, or at least some lame ducks, here in our own country. That's my theory. Maybe I should have asked David about that. Well, while I'm waiting for more tweets and emails to come up, let me recap where we are. We've talked to Amnesty International about Syria. We've talked to a lawyer who I would class as being pro-dog about the dangerous dogs situation. We've talked, I have, about Wally, because we still can't find him, or the big ugly bear, Tom Watson, because we haven't been able to find him either. We've talked to Lisa Duffy, savage in tooth and claw and running for the leadership of UKIP as part of a Crufts parade of lesser breeds. And we've now talked about Donald Trump. We've got 45 minutes to go, and you can call me on 0844 499 1000.
Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Indeed we will. 0844 499 1000. And a woman caller would definitely be prioritised. Anis is from Amsterdam on Donald Trump. Anis, welcome.
Thank you, George. Thank you for having me on your show.
You're welcome. I'm glad. Are you listening to us regularly in Amsterdam?
Very regularly from my living room, listening to this show, to Sputnik.
Oh, fantastic. My wife is from Amsterdam, actually.
On TV.
My wife
Yes,
is from
I
Amsterdam.
know. I don't know Gayatri personally, but I know that she's from Amsterdam.
Great. Go ahead, sir.
What I want to ask, well, it's not really a question, but what do you think of Trump, as crazy he is, having access to nuclear bombs, and the theory that we can be in a nuclear war soon with Russia?
Well, he could trip over. He could trip over the bag and set off the World War quite by accident, or he could pick the bag up with those dainty little hands that might be too heavy, drops to the floor, bang, the intercontinental ballistic missiles are off and away. The only thing as terrifying as him having his fingers, dainty little fingers, on the nuclear button is Hillary Clinton having her rather shaky post-senility fingers on the nuclear button.
Yes, she seems to have Parkinson's, if I believe.
There's tremendous, in the last couple of days, all kinds of pictures of handrails being put up at Joe Biden's home, for example, so that she could, without embarrassment, climb the stairs. She's having to have recourse to stools, to sitting down. There's something wrong with Hillary Clinton, and I mean in addition to all the blood-soaked wrongs with which she is intimately associated. So what's terrifying for me, Anis, is that this contest is between King Kong and a prematurely senile great white shark.
That's true. It's hard to choose between Hillary and Trump.
Well, I'm supporting Dr. Jill Stein. You can follow her on Twitter at Dr. Jill Stein.
She has been on your show once.
She has. She's the Green Party candidate, and she's the best presidential candidate since Bobby Kennedy. And I've followed them all very, very closely. She's elegant. She's eloquent. She's highly intelligent. She's Jewish. She is a lover of peace and a hater of war. And she's as green as can be in terms of the environment. What's not to love?
Well, you are right, but intelligence is not the thing that the world order wants. They rather want someone loving something else which is green, that is money.
Yes.
So I think it will be...
She fails on that count. Anis, thanks very much for your call, my friend. Keep listening in Amsterdam. Mark is in Liverpool on Wally. Owen Smith. Go ahead, Mark.
Hello, George. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. I'm up in Liverpool tomorrow at the Fact Cinema at 4:40. I hope you'll be there.
No, I'm not going to be able to get there, George, but I tell you what, mate, I'm disappointed I'm not going to be able to get there. Other things have come up, but I've got something to tell you. Ken from the Highlands.
Yes.
He's alive and well.
He's alive and well, but not listening to talk radio, it would appear, or at least not phoning me.
I know, I heard him on in Bandit Country on another radio
He
show.
did. He got banned on a rival, well, they think they're a rival station. More one of these lesser breeds at Crofts, you know. But Ken from the Highlands used to call me the Antichrist. Do you remember? He used to call me, he used to say that I worshipped the whore of Babylon. It was only later that I realized that he actually meant Roman Catholic. I mean, according to him, to be a Roman Catholic is to be a follower of Satan. I'm not making this up.
No, George. Listen, I can remember all them days on their talk sport and that, and he's still at it now. He's too far gone. He's committed. He's all the way.
Now, do you know this, Mark? I'll tell you something funny. He's a professional footballer. He would never tell me who, but he played at the top in Scottish and English football. He's somebody who was once famous, but I've never been able to find out who he actually is. He played he played in top flight football in both Scotland and England.
Well, it just shows you, mate, doesn't it? Takes all sorts, yeah.
Well, look, let's put out now an all points alert. All information on Ken from the Highlands will be gratefully received. And tell him his ban does not apply on talk radio. So if he calls me, he can call me the whore of Babylon. He can call me the Antichrist. He can call me anything. Just call me. Just call me, Ken.
Hey, George.
Yes.
George, do you know what, mate? I missed the hustings this week. Do you know what? I haven't got a computer, you know. I'm going to have to try and sort something and learn how to do it because I'm missing so much information and that. When's the next one, mate?
Well, you do need to get with the program. You need to get on Twitter. You need to get on Facebook. And you need to get on the internet. It's a newfangled thing, Mark. I understand from the UKIP candidate that they'll even allow you to use it the next time you're in jail. That was Mark in Liverpool, who only reads the press when he's in prison, as you'll recall from a previous encounter. Now, a texter, again, no name, only a number, says, Syria, shock, horror, why? We've seen it all before. Hiroshima, Vietnam. What did you think wars do? If Dave had his way, we'd have been in the thick of it. The Bush and Blair Corp and some of the media supported the illegal war on Iraq, followed by Libya, Afghanistan, and almost Syria. Well, I've got news for you. We are in Syria. Lizzie Fletcher says Trump may well become president due to Hillary being the only other option. They should have backed Bernie. Indeed, they should. And Bernie should have run as an independent when they didn't, because they cheated him. Yazid Mesaoudi says dangerous dogs means those who are leading Trump. And another texter says, good evening, George. It's fantastic you're back in the radio. I joined the Labour Party when Corbyn became leader and will be most definitely voting for him again, despite the fact that the media is so biased against him and his supporters, because his level of decency, integrity and substance will result in him succeeding again. Now, should I take Scott? Now, Scott on the Middle East in Glasgow. Go ahead, Scott.
Hi there, George. Nice to speak to you again.
And you, sir. Go on.
I was just want to bring up a point of a pie. I know it's pie in the sky, but a point of a starting point of getting on a kind of even keel with the Middle East would be reparations towards them, towards the Middle East, as in Iran. Well, as far as I'm led to believe, in the First and Second World Wars, their lands were raped left, right and centre for the benefit of the wars. and I think it was the First World War, there was 20 million Iraqis. There was 20 million population. By the time the war was done, there was 10. And this was through the lands getting raped to wheat and grain and everything else for the war effort. And they were using like Iraqi trains and different forms of transport, tractors and different things like that. And when the war was done, it was like, okay, the war's finished, but you get nothing. And it's been like that for them for the last 100 years, as far as I'm led to believe.
Well, look, Scott, you're absolutely right to this extent that Britain and France occupied as colonies almost every square metre of the Middle East, and I include Iran in that. We were the occupying power in Iran. We stole their wealth. We overthrew their democratically elected Prime Minister, Mossadegh, and we occupied the entire area, carved it up in our own interests, and installed puppet kings, later presidents, for our own edification and enrichment. But it's not actually reparations that they need now. The Arab world is richer than us. What the Arab world needs is the West to get out of their affairs. That's what they need. They don't need anything from us, just the sight of our back, leaving their area and getting our noses out of their affairs. Thanks for the call, Scott. Sorry to press on. Lizzie says, it didn't fit with the plan. The EU inners are convinced that Owen Smith will win the leadership and prompt a new referendum. Well, I suppose that's the wet dream of UKIP, that Labour has a leader who wants to fight the EU referendum all over again. Colette says, I love you, George, but post-senility. No, I said premature senility. I didn't expect ageism from you. How are your knees today? Well, Colette, my knees are as they are every other day, like coiled springs. I'm up in the morning like a coiled spring. And the fact that Hillary Clinton is beginning to show some signs of premature infirmity is a fact that has not been missed by the US electorate. It's hardly the worst thing about her. The worst thing about her is that she's dripping in blood.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, don't forget that coming up after me is the great Ian Lee, a terrific broadcaster, has a great show, and I do hope that you'll stay tuned to Talk Radio. And don't forget, also, tomorrow morning from 8, Patrina, the pet coach, joins Penny Smith to talk about how to avoid the problems of dangerous dogs that we too were talking about this evening. And Dr. Kerry Nixon gives an insight into the mind of the murderer of Sadie Hartley. So tune in to Talk Radio tomorrow morning. You won't want to miss it. Now, we talked earlier about Corbyn and Wally and the big ugly bear. Andrew's on the line, I don't know from where, and wants to talk about that same subject. Andrew, go ahead.
Hi, George. How are you doing?
I'm good. Where are you from? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Crewe.
Crewe. Okay, excellent. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say a couple of things, actually, George. I wanted to mention about... I listened to one of your shows a couple of weeks ago, and you were talking to somebody about Trump and Clinton due to have a debate in September.
Yeah, I think it's still on.
Oh, right, that's good, because I had that Trump was pulling his strings and trying to get out of it, and I thought that'd be really disappointing, not only from an educational perspective, but also
I do read that, Andrew, but I doubt it, because if Trump is trailing badly in the polls, then he's got nothing to lose from these debates. He'd have to go for it. And he's a monster, she's a monster, he just might be able to out-monster her. So I expect those debates to go ahead.
Oh, that's good, because I was quite looking forward to watching those anyway.
I'll tell you this, Andrew, if my candidate, Dr. Jill Stein, was on the television on the debates, she'd sweep the country. But they won't allow the Green Party into the debates.
No, it's a shame.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say, George, was, and I know I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but about all the media attention calling people in the Labour Party, Trotskyites, and there's even an article last weekend about stormtroopers supporting Corbyn, and I just wanted to say I'm quite a new man.
We've been stormtroopers, jihadists, Trotskyite twisters. There's no name. There is a cult. There is no insult left unturned in this. Sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, really. I mean, I've only joined the Labour Party a few months ago. I've been to party meetings and I've been to see Jeremy speak in Liverpool. And all I've experienced is really kind, tolerant people. I mean, when I went to Liverpool, there was 20,000 people there. There was no police, no trouble. It was all elderly people, disabled, ethnic minorities, children. It was just fantastic. No trouble at all. There was not a policeman in sight. And yet you read the media and we just come across as a bunch of communists or Nazis. And
that's it. There was a great meme that I saw of a little boy on a train saying, "Blimey, I had just got my Trotskyite uniform ready and now I've discovered I'm a Nazi stormtrooper. I'll have to go back to the drawing board." That comment in last week's Mail on Sunday about, and they actually had a picture of Nazi stormtroopers illustrating the article. Now, for those of us who know our history, the Mail supported Hitler, supported fascism, openly on their front pages. Hurrah for the black shirts, they said. Their owner went to Berlin to pay tribute at the court of Adolf Hitler. And they're calling Jeremy Corbyn a Nazi stormtrooper. You couldn't make it up, Andrew.
No.
Unfortunately, you don't have to.
No.
Well, thanks very much for your call. I appreciate it.
Thank
Pleasure to talk to you. Let's talk to my old friend Ray in Ponte. Because,
Good evening, George.
Ray, I said to you last week that these Olympics leave me cold. But I read an article this week by Simon Jenkins in The Guardian, a very fine writer, a man of the right, but a very fine writer.
Yeah.
And he actually made the point that we are, through our expenditure, deliberately investing in sports where you can win a multiplicity of medals to the exclusion of other sports. And we've put in £254 million of public money into elite sports, in those sports where it's possible for you to win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 gold medals.
Yeah.
And those that are in sports where you can only win one are at the back of the queue when the funding comes in. Now, I said last week that the Olympics was a contest between the drug cheats we haven't caught yet.
Yeah.
Now, I was only joking, half joking. Where do you stand?
Well, what I'm saying, George, I can't watch it no more. I used to watch the Tour de France and admire the riders in the Tour de France, but I can't watch that now. Now, with the Olympics, George, they have supposed drug testing. Now, the experts say that they're 2 steps in front of the drug testers. 1. 2, they don't do blood tests because it's so expensive. And also, these athletes, there was a cyclist, wasn't he? A British cyclist.
Yes.
She missed 3 tests, didn't she?
So they say, I couldn't vouch for that. I don't know too much about it.
3 tests. If you miss 3 tests, George, you've got to be available 24/7 for the testers. If you miss 3 tests, you're automatically banned. But she got away with it because there was a little discrepancy. I can't. I don't know who's cheating or who's not. Do you know what I mean, George?
No, that's right. That's one of the reasons why it leaves me completely cold. I cannot pretend to be interested in hockey, women's hockey or men's hockey. I cannot pretend to be interested in people lifting heavy weights or pummeling a horse in a gymnasium. I cannot pretend to be interested in judo.
No.
But we've got BBC people there at our expense shrieking in ecstasy at performances of someone we've never heard of performing a sport that we would never dream of watching.
George, can I congratulate you on that tour de force? I watched it yesterday, your DVD, Killings of Tony Blair.
Thank you, Ray. I'm glad you did.
Superb, George, honestly.
I appreciate that.
It's about time we had a bit of truth in it.
Yes, absolutely. Ray in Pontypridd, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for buying my film. And, of course, as I said, I'll be in Liverpool at 4:40 at Fact Cinema tomorrow.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Who is Anton Deck? I've waited all night and no one has told me. Is he a singer? A guitar player? A matinee idol? A reality TV star? A news presenter? Who is Anton Deck? And why should Jeremy Corbyn know who he is? Now, I need to point this out. Lizzie Armistead missed 3 out-of-competition drug tests. Okay, you heard it here. Sinbad the Sailor says, in the UK, they hide their returns in case they're seen as too rich. In the US, in case they're thought too poor. Very, very good point. And that's what I think old Trumpy is doing. Exposition says Welsh shouldn't have anything to do with it. Alas, it's not the case in US politics. And Persistent Pete says, what a dreadful choice for Americans and the rest of us. Dark times ahead, folks. Dark times. Indeed, that's true. And all my imprecations, my beseeching, has paid dividends. I have a woman caller, Livy from Gloucester. Welcome, Livy.
Hello, it's Lizzie with Z's, actually.
Lizzie.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Although they are both derivatives of the same name, Elizabeth.
They are.
Go
They
ahead.
are. You can call me Elizabeth if you prefer.
I prefer. Go ahead. Go ahead, my queen.
Right. Well, I was tweeting you earlier in conversation about Trump, and Piers Morgan says that he's a very smart man and that he's just saying what people want to hear at the moment. And as soon as he's elected president, he'll be making some very smart moves.
Well, I respect Piers Morgan, and I know that he knows Trump, and I don't. But I can't go with him on that, and I can't wish for him to become president because Piers Morgan thinks he's going to come out as Albert Einstein once he's got the election behind him. As far as I'm concerned, both Trump and Clinton are dangers to the world. They are dangers to America, and they are dangers to the world. And I think that he is a lunatic, and I think he's a fool, and I think that Hillary Clinton is a knave. And is it better for a fool rather than a knave? Who knows?
Yes. I would like to ask, your preferred candidate, the Green candidate.
Dr. Jill Stein, yes.
Stein, yes. And the fact that you said earlier that Barney should have gone as independent.
Yes.
How does that stand? Do they stand any chance of getting anywhere? Because there does seem to be carte blanche given to Republicans or Democrats.
Well, there is, but if we continue with this lesser evilism as the yardstick by which we make our decisions, by definition, everything will get more and more evil, because the lesser evil will chase the greater evil in the direction of evil. And that's what's happening. That's what we've got now. We've got a lunatic against a killer. And how do we choose between those two? So eventually, Lizzie, you've got to break this cycle of choosing between the two cheeks of the same backside.
Yes, but Barney raised a lot of money by small donations across the country, and yet he's still got... Well, how did he get taken down? He ended up standing...
Well, he got cheated. He got cheated by the so-called Democratic Party leadership, as WikiLeaks abundantly revealed.
Can he come back from that, do you think? Can he come back?
It's too late now. It's too late. He's pledged his troth to Hillary Clinton, and that was a very big mistake. And frankly, he's undone a lot of the good that he had achieved. Lizzie, thanks for that call from lovely Gloucester. The legend that is Damien in Brighton is now on the line. Damien, the floor is yours.
Good evening, George.
Good evening, sir.
George, I just wanted to pick up on the comment you made at the top of the show about the delayed YouGov poll for the Labour leadership, the intentions of Labour Party members in the contest.
Yes.
I can provide, I think, some useful information on this. I've been doing some work on the analysis of a sample which is somewhat larger than the YouGov sample. Just to let people know, YouGov normally do samples of between 1,000 to 2,000 individuals. I've done some work on the Jeremy Corbyn polling, of which is a current running total of 25,000 Labour members.
Yeah.
The current results of that, as of this evening, is that there's a ratio of 2.6 to 1 voting in favour of Jeremy Corbyn.
So that would give him what as a percentage?
So you're talking that he will, as it currently stands, he's on track to increase his mandate from the last leadership election.
Well, you see, what I heard, Damien, I can't say I heard it from the horse's mouth, because I didn't. But I heard it from a source that ought to be well informed, that the YouGov poll is being suppressed because it is so catastrophically bad for Owen Smith that it seemed like it must be some kind of aberration. And so they're double and triple checking it before releasing it, because it will leave Smith in a not just an impossible situation, he's been in that from the beginning, but a risible, a laughingstock situation.
Well, there have been times throughout the polling where Jeremy's been nudging at 3-to-1 ratio. What I wanted to say, George, really about this is that I think it's fair to say that the indications would be that this contest is now over. And I think it's probably time for the Labour Party to pivot away from the contest and look forward to opposing the Conservatives and to preparing for the next general election. And I just think I think my main point is this: we're in campaign season. There's been a lot of vitriol from both sides. I think that there's a lot of resentment from long-standing Labour members who see new people coming into the party, and I think that the new members should recognise the contribution that those long-standing members have made. I think that we need to now acknowledge the successes of the previous Labour government and build on those. And I think that we've got to basically, put aside all of these petty squabbles, and we've got to look at how we're going to now get behind Jeremy Corbyn and his policies.
Damien, are you running for Parliament?
No, I'm not, George. But I just want to say to anybody who is voting for Owen Smith that we're all on the same side. The policies that Jeremy Corbyn is suggesting are doing something quite unique, and what they're doing is they're aligning the interests with the public with the interests of the economy. And just a couple of very brief examples on that, George. Jeremy's going to introduce a £10 minimum wage, which is going to give a boost to the economy. The nationalisation of the railways is going to provide efficiencies, relieve stress, relieve the cost of travel for people travelling to work, which is a vote winner with Conservatives. Housing. In the first Parliament under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, there's going to be 500,000 council houses and 500,000...
Yeah, but you say you're all on the same side with all that, Damien, but you know that that's not true. Alistair Campbell and Jack Straw and Peter Mandelson and Tony Blair are not on the side of those policies?
No, they're not, George, but the point is that they are... the policies that they have offered have been very similar to Conservative policies, and they've failed the economy. What we need to do now is get across the message to people that these are policies which are going to benefit, for example, with the house building, they're going to benefit building companies.
No, I agree with that. Of course.
Damien,
I need to press on. Yeah. Thanks for that. Well, faintly disturbing call from Damien in Brighton. Here's Deborah near Wigan in Greater Manchester. Deborah. Go ahead.
Hello, George.
Hi.
Hi there. Sorry if my voice is a bit shaky. I'm a little bit nervous.
That's okay. I promise you I don't bark or bite.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I just wanted to lend my voice really to something that's obviously massively being discussed at the moment, but just my anger really with the Labour leadership contest. I'm 33 years old, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I've got a bit of hope,
exactly.
Politically, and finally, there's something worth voting for, and I'm really, really scared at the moment that it's just sort of being snatched away with all these underhand tactics that are being...
Well, that's right. And by the way, Deborah, contrary to what Damien and Brighton said, it isn't all over. It isn't at all over. First of all, the votes are not even in yet, and secondly, the voting is not the end of it, because the Blairites, of whom Owen Smith is one, have openly stated that the war continues after the leadership election, if Jeremy Corbyn allows that. So, of course we need the biggest possible victory for Corbyn, and that will weaken the Blairite camp, but it will not put an end to their perpetual, permanent revolution. How's that for a Trotskyite twist?
No, I totally agree with you, and it is very worrying. I mean, I feel like I've got a lot of hope, because when I watch, some of his speeches, and you see the people, that are thanking him and crying to him, for giving them hope. So I do feel hopeful in that respect. But it's little things like at work, I'm part of the union, USDOR, and I didn't find out until it was too late through doing my own research that I could have had a vote.
Yeah, they rigged that, and the GMB rigged theirs. The Blairite camp is by no means dead. It might be dead in society at large. Blair is detested in the country, as I'm finding out as I go around all these cinemas showing my film. But Blair is still strong in the Labour Party.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely agree, but I just hope, because all we've seen from Jeremy is just handling the whole thing with such grace and dignity, that I hope that doesn't mean that if he does win, that he's going to, I think he does need to kind of toughen up a little bit.
Well, I do too. I mean, grace and dignity are his middle name. Absolutely. He is full of grace, he is full of dignity, and that's how he got the leadership.
Yeah.
But, of course, if you are faced with what is effectively, politically speaking, an armed rebellion inside your own ranks, trying to shoot you dead every day and all day, you can't just keep being graceful and dignified about that. You have to put down that rebellion.
Yeah, and once the people have spoken again, he needs to feel the confidence of that and feel that he is able to do something about that, in a more rigorous way, and not, welcome them back with open arms.
Well, I hope so. And don't get me wrong, Deborah, I agree with something I think it was Owen Jones wrote this week. If it wasn't him, it sounds like the kind of thing that he would write. And I agree with it. The Labour Party cannot be a party just for socialists. It has to be a party for socialists and social democrats. It has to be a party with a left and a right. And they have to live in the same tent. But they can't be allowed to burn the tent down. They can't be allowed to destroy the camp. It doesn't. We do need people who don't believe in the red banner of socialist politics, but who believe in a milder form of social democracy. Otherwise, in our electoral system, first past the post, we will not ever be able to see a Labour government if those two forces are not allied. So they need to be allied, and a place has to be found. You see, I lived under Harold Wilson, James Callaghan, John Smith, and I was friends with all of them. I mean, personal friends with all of them.
Yeah.
Because all of them were on the right, but all of them knew that there had to be a right and a left. There had to be social democrats like them, and there had to be socialists like me or Corbyn. And that kind of leadership, whether it's from the left or from the right, is what's necessary. But Blair destroyed all that.
Yeah. I mean, how do you, as a progressive, you don't have, if you don't have that sort of opposition challenging you, that, that's the way you
Exactly. That's what democracy means.
Exactly. You don't end up maintaining the status quo, which is exactly what they're trying to do. And it's very scary seeing just the levels. In my lifetime, I've never seen
anything like this. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's
Deborah, get over to Liverpool. You're not far away. Get over to Liverpool tomorrow, 4:40. Introduce yourself to me if you can. That was Deborah near Wigan in Greater Manchester. Now, I have some breaking news. It turns out that Anton Deck is a dancer on Strictly. Now, how could Jeremy Corbyn possibly be expected to identify a dancer on Strictly, other than Ed Balls, who is on the new season of Strictly Come Dancing? But Jeremy's not the sort of man that... I enjoy Strictly Come Dancing. I like the suits, I like the dresses, I like the dancing, but I wouldn't be able to identify Anton Deck. So for Jeremy Corbyn to be maligned and traduced and insulted because he didn't know a dancer on Strictly Come Dancing is ridiculous in the extreme. Well, I think it's been marvellous. I hope you did too. And if you did, come back next week at the same time, same place. Stay tuned to Talk Radio.